Welcome, peoples within our nation and victims of defenestration, to the RubberGum anime podcast, where I am the rubber and my friend Jake is the gum. Today we're talking about the the Neon Genesis Evangelion rebuild movies.
Yeah, if you paid attention to our last episode, we're recording some of these things in bulk. That's why we're dressed the same. We do own more clothes,
Yep.
But we just wanted to get ahead of things, and we've watched a lot of things months ago in preparation to do episodes, and we just kind of want to record those so we can focus on more modern things that we're doing.
Yeah, and make more episodes for you.
Yeah, and our, the timbre of all of them is going to be different. Future Diary was chaotic. Hunter was just us being angry. Code Geass was pretty much a solid mix. And here we're going to be a bit more, less complimentary. Like Code Geass, in a bizarre way that I never really thought about until now, is that this is basically the same thing. Is that we're watching recap movies, and they have almost the same problems on a movie by movie basis, and then the fourth iteration of this story is going to come out this year supposedly. And we will evaluate Ava, which fucking Ava 1.0 plus 3.0, because we can't just say 4 because we're fucking stupid. But yeah, we're talking about the Ava rebuild movies, all three of them, the trilogy of films that came to sort of like that. Hideaki Anno sort of, you know what, you just get on this because you know this a lot more succinctly than me.
So Evangelion, a show that needs no introduction, so much so that I don't think we'll really go into the plot of it, because if you haven't seen it, you should see it. Or
it's the most popular anime like ever, and it's one of the most significant works of art in the medium, and it's the mech show. Shinji, get in the robot.
It is a franchise that has more sales globally than The Simpsons.
Yeah, and its new English dub premiered on Netflix last year, so you've probably been exposed to it in some form or fashion, at least.
But yeah, Evangelion, of course, Japanese anime. That's what we discussed, but it's the singular vision of Hideaki Anno, the show's manically depressed creator who... beautiful man. We love him. He has made so many versions of Evangelion over the years that it's staggering. The original show ended in a way he wasn't happy with, so we ended up getting the End of Evangelion film, as well as a recap movie of that show called like The Rebirth of Evangelion.
Yeah. We didn't want to cover that just because, frankly, it's really not all that important. We're fucking not sick of recap shit.
All that important, but that's... So the original show has its continuity. It becomes iconic. Masterpiece, beloved by all. Well, most, unless you hate Evangelion and you're weird.
Yeah. I mean, this is just like a hit among like one of the things that caught me so off guard last year that happened was our friend Cole Duffy, who, anime, not that boy's bag in the slightest, elected to just watch through all of Ava and then watch End of Evangelion, and he like 5-starred both. And it's just like, that is a testament to the quality and ubiquitousness of this fucking franchise, which I think that like it's just sort of commonly accepted as one of the greatest canon works of art of like pretty much ever at this point. And I think it's easy to see why. It's like you sort of watch how this show that's taking off after, like, it's playing on a lot of the old tropes of mech anime and fucking what Gundam? Yeah, Gundam.
A lot, and dozens of other mech anime which have been names lost to both of us.
Yeah, and it's their take on a newer one, and it's like the appeal of that show when it starts off, and when it started off, was that it was basically the most sleek and refined version of all of this, and it was also really smart about it. It's just like, you've got Anno, who's this very utilitarian director. He uses shot composition in a really striking way, so that even when the action scenes in Ava are sort of like where all the money of that show goes, and they look great still, but like he gets a lot of mileage out of like lots of still images, lots of and that sort of continues along, especially in the end of the show where it's basically storyboards.
a director who owes a ton to Ano is Akiyuki Shinbo, who
Mm-hmm.
takes a ton of Ano's very signature singular shots and rougher, kind of a lot of rougher textures, but does it obviously in his own way.
Yeah, and I think that's what's most impressive about it is that it's like, well, it's impressive, and I also to just I find the narrative of Anno with Evangelion to be mildly tragic at this point because it's like it was it was that good Gundam show that he made and it was it was going well, and then as August alluded to, he suffered a horrible manic depressive episode and the entire trajectory of the show of Evangelion changed, coalescing with production problems. That the ending of that show was just basically unprecedented. It came from a real place of genuine pain and like actual artistic struggle, like on both ends of him,
And
his team, the company they were working
also
for.
notably a show that had to have like a whole episode's worth of finished content thrown out because of real world events that happened.
Yep. Was that like was that like a tsunami?
It was a subway gas attack episode, which
that's right.
really did happen, and so that episode completely thrown out.
Imagine having like being that utilitarian worksman storyteller and having a piece of like having an episode, like if you just took an episode out of Evangelion that exists right now, you took any given episode out of it, the show will suffer for it. There's so much that's done, even if it doesn't contribute too much to the overall story, the character building and the way everything works, it's like you will lose something vital. So if you pull that episode, it probably started off being like, it's like Anno was probably pretty discouraged by that. It's like, well, what about the shit that I put in here? This is important.
Like notably, this show works in that sense so well. And years later, Ano comes back to Evangelion and he's like, okay, I'm going to redo this. But it's going to be
I have money now. I am successful now. I have made other films now. I will be able to... It is
going to be strictly my vision because I'm enough of a ubiquitous figure in Japanese and just global popular culture that I can make this and make it work. And this and the rebuild films end up becoming that, maybe not necessarily revision, but more an alternate take on the same material.
Yes. And much like our previous episode on Code Geass, this is a sort of first for us where we're definitely going against the grain here. Granted, I know a lot more people that don't care for the rebuild movies than do care for Code Geass. But that said, these movies generally are very, very well received. Like, I think the most negative opinions that I see on this movie or on these movies are basically just people being like, yeah, I enjoyed it, but like, I think the show's just a little bit better. And that's just their take. And it's like, that's an understandable take, but we've got some problems with it. And considering we're both fans of the source material, it's like, it's like I said earlier, it's tragic in the sense that like he finally does get the chance to tell this story the way he wants to tell it right now. And in my opinion, at least, Evangelion's reputation sort of undid it in terms of that with Anno. And I'll draw a comparison here between American filmmaker George Romero, who basically made one of the most iconic zombie movies of all time with Night of the Living Dead. And that is a movie that ends with the main character being shot by a mob of people, and the mob of people is white and the man is black, and he's thought to be a zombie. And people thought this was a really interesting piece of social commentary. This was a really poignant thing, really interesting way to end your movie. And lots of tropes of zombie stuff just sort of like coalesce that make people view that movie as being pretty important. Meanwhile, George Romero's like, that really wasn't intended. I just kind of cast this guy because he was the best actor. So, but everybody kept telling him that like after Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, movies that have a lot of political subtext in them, that he makes political movies. And then he made Land of the Dead, which is him being like, oh, people think I make political movies, so now I have to make a political movie, and Land of the Dead is bad. And that's kind of what happens with him here, is that everybody loves to say that Evangelion is a deconstruction. Evangelion is this black mirror of normal mech animes. It's super dark. It goes super existential. It's a deconstruction. That's the word everybody likes to throw around, and people like to say it's, you know, it subverts expectations. It subverts certain tropes.
Yeah.
But the thing is that in my opinion, my broad thesis for these three movies is that they, like, he got kind of high off of himself, and then
and
it
I would
decided
say,
to obey function over form, because these serve as deconstructions, but they don't serve as movies or
and
stories.
that is really the underlying issue, because I think when you watch the original Evangelion divorced from the context of like the deconstruction idea, I don't think it comes off as a deconstruction necessarily.
Exactly like Hunter x Hunter. Same thing.
Same thing. It's not it, it having deconstructive or different or like unique elements in it is just a part of the story being told. It's just that those are incidental to what's being told and not the point. And these movies suffer from that being the point and not incidental.
Yeah, it also just sort of doesn't hurt that the first two are sort of this weird Frankenstein amalgamation of like half recap, half some things that are new and different and changed, and like the pacing of things is a little bit different, but like we'll just dive headfirst into these after, now that
Yeah.
we've set the stage, because like the premise here is, you know, Anno gets to take what Evangelion was and take it whatever direction he wants to now. And he's made a bunch of movies in between this. He made movies like Love and Pop. He directed something like Shin Godzilla. So he's seen success outside of his original area of expertise. So, you know, he's coming into this as a more seasoned dude. And the first recap movie, which came out, God, a long time ago, comparatively speaking, which was, what year was that movie?
2007 was the first one.
2007. So that movie comes along, and it's the easiest one to talk about because it's, again, it's a recap.
It's just the first 6 episodes of the show with new animation.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem, is that it's like, okay, I don't object to that. Like, again, recap movie, you have to go in expecting that things are going to be a bit disjointed. However, for some inexplicable reason, the first two movies in this trilogy, they're just not animated very well. Like, the color design is ugly, the
Yeah,
character designs are plasticky.
and
The
that's the thing about the first the original show, is that it's got striking color design. Every color pops out really stunningly well. The characters have really good character designs that really make you can just remember them in such an easy way because they've got very distinct colors associated with them. They all have
Asuka's
like
red, Rei is blue, that kind of shit.
Shinji's shirt is white. You get Misato as the purple hair,
Purple, red jacket. I mean,
red
it's
jacket.
iconic. It's iconic.
It's iconic. It sticks in your mind. And this movie's idea is to just knock the saturation down like 15 pegs, and it looks garish and ugly.
Yeah, it looks like an overexposed photograph at points, and it's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something much better about the fact that, like, some people sort of be like, oh, well, Ava doesn't work for me because it starts off as like a normal mech thing and then it becomes something entirely different. And I'm like, well, that's the appeal, but okay. But
Okay.
that
Yeah.
said, the good color design, the directing that it starts out in the show is like, it's appreciated, but it's not very showy, and I think that's on purpose because it's sort of luring you into a false sense of security, and then that makes that like final segment of the show hit so hard, and that
yeah.
sense of composition is simply not in the first two at all.
No. And there's something I think also notable about the show, that like when there's like a bright light in the show, the beam it's like searing in your eyes. Like the colors are so distinct from each other, and this really I just have to emphasize how terrible the color design is, because it ruins this so much.
All muted for some
It's
fucking
muted,
reason.
and like when a bomb goes off in the show, the whole screen will like go white. In this movie, it'll do the same thing, but it doesn't have the same effect. the impact is lost. So much of the impact of the fights are lost because of that color design. Like, it's the same shots, but without the understanding of what worked about them, and it loses so much of the information.
And speaking of losing information, it also like, again, I understand that to some degree these are for people who already know these things, but at the same time, the world building in these two is just kind of exceptionally poor. It throws you into the thick of things so quick and just doesn't elaborate off of like the situation. It's like we're so locked into Nerve as a construct that it's like, what exactly is the state of the world right now? Like, is Shinji being thrown into this? Is this weird for him? Is like what's the setup? What's the geography? Where are we even? And it, as a result, it just kind of leaves you hanging, and you just have Shinji to tether onto to be like, okay, I'll have this character sort of, walk about and lead me through this story. And the problem here too is that it also is just like everything is a deconstruction first and a character story or idea second, where Shinji is just like, his entire character in these movies is that he's useless. It's like, yes, but no, like the whole thing, and what makes the third movie so goddamn infuriating is that it finally remembers that Shinji's entire purpose is that it's like he's great at one thing and they need him for one thing, and he sucks at everything else. And that's the source of his main conflict, is that it's like he's got this strained relationship with his dad. He's trying to, be friend slash be romantically attached to people like Rei and Asuka. Then there's the weird relationship he's got with Misato, and it's all these things. And in these movies, the first two, he's a fucking robot. He's just there. And I'm just like, why? You had this layered character that just isn't here anymore.
He's just all function, and it takes a lot of the humanity out of the rebuilds, in that no one feels, and this gets like especially bad with characters like Asuka and Kaoru, who become like no personality, exclusively function.
Oh man, it's definitely, I don't know if maybe it's just me preferring this character or just I don't know, but what it does to Asuka, I think, is almost the worst thing until the third movie itself.
I hate what they did to that
character.
character.
She's a tsundere, period. That's it. That's
she's
it.
a bitch, period.
And it's like, again, it's like, yes, but no,
no, there was
you forgot everything that makes her that way. It's like she wasn't a tsundere. It's that there was reasons as to why she was this way that it never talks about.
She was a character who came from, like Shinji, a broken home, and fails to connect with people. And kind of in contrast to Shinji, she's a character who has like this very pronounced burgeoning sexuality, and she's just put in a state where she's not able to express that, and she feels so constrained because of that, and we see that manifesting in like the worst ways possible with her character. But this movie removes all of that, because who needs character? We got to do story strictly.
And like, again, first movie, it's just beat for beat the show. Like, there are some things that happen in different orders, and whenever it does happen in a different order, it's just unequivocally worse. Like, I don't know why. Like, there could, like, by random chance, one of these structure choices should work, and none of them do.
Nope.
Like, I'm just sort of like, and you just get less of everyone, and I'm like, man,
Shinji's friends who he has in the show, who are kind of extraneous in the show too, their scenes mean nothing in this movie. You could cut them out because they don't appear in the second movie. They don't appear in the third movie. They might appear in the second one, but if they do, it's like for 5 seconds. But they have a payoff. Those characters amount to something in the show in one of the second movie's worst changes, which is where instead of one of Shinji's friends being in the Ava that goes berserk and gets gets overtaken by an angel. It's Asuka, because apparently that's supposed to mean more because Asuka's the character the fans recognize. But it's like, no, it needs to be that other character because there's that emotion and mystery as to who's in there. And we see that Shinji is empathetic to whoever is in there, even if he doesn't know. And it's a fascinating, interesting dynamic. And it also has the great twist at the end of the episode where the pod finally opens up. You're like, oh my God, it's that character I thought was useless. He's actually got a point in this show. And it's great, but that's gone and it's stupid and it sucks.
You just remove, like, it just, granted, I know this will be harder, but it just highlights the fact that, like, structurally speaking, Ava's not suited to movies. End of Ava is an exception to that rule because it bookends the show. It's so tangentially and essentially tied to that season of the show that it becomes inseparable from it. Like it's just necessary. And you have all of that context and it informs that. Whereas if you do it from the ground up as movies, it's just you're sacrificing everything about what you benefited from in terms of structure, which was a lot. You benefited from that insanely well, debatably the best of anybody in like the entire medium. So again, like, is there a reason that you didn't make this a show? It rings very David Lynch doing The Return or George Lucas doing the prequels, where it's like, just because you have the freedom to do this doesn't necessarily mean that you should. Art through adversity is a reason that a lot of things are great. Ava is like the best example I can think of.
And also, and we should make our position here clear here that it's not like just because art has to go through an adversity doesn't inherently make it good. What makes it good is overcoming your technical limitations and making something greater out of that. And that can fly completely under the radar of some people and be evidently apparent to others. But that's so built into the DNA of what these shows are, and not having that defining element is so gutting, especially, and that's the biggest problem in these first two movies. Third one's its own beast, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, the whole leaning so far into deconstruction first, story second is ironic to me, because at some points it leans so far into deconstruction that it just becomes the things that it supposedly deconstructs. Because it's like, you watch the first movie, Divorced from Everything, this is just the kids have to pilot the robot stories that I've seen 90,000 times in other shows that were like, that either were influencing this or were influenced by it. And like, you kind of fail. Like, there's no other way to put it. It's just like, you have all of the surface level stuff, and if you just focus on being this one thing without remembering the core and heart and sincerity of this story, you just become like this artless husk. And that's how I view the first movie very, very specifically, kind of the second movie. I guess we can move on to the second movie a bit more prominently, because that does change a couple things and add some things.
Yeah, I mean, the first movie, I think we've talked out well enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's the show, but worse. None of the personality. That's it.
Second movie adds a bit of its own stuff.
And it's bad. And it's all bad. Namely in the introduction of that new character who works for Nerve, who also pilots one of the Avas, who I got a laugh out of you when we were so depressed while watching 3, where I said, this is a character that's literally just designed to be jerked off to and put on body pillows. And I stand by that. It's just like, she has no place in this story.
Like the first proper scene in which she meets Shinji, she just like waves her ass at him, and it's like, well, I get it, thanks.
And like, she just doesn't contribute. She just doesn't contribute in a meaningful way at all. I don't know her character. Who is she? What does she want? Why is she the way that she is?
I don't know her name.
No, I mean, I'd have to look it up, and I'm pretty sure she's voiced by like somebody like Miyuki Sawashiro, someone who's just like, you're too talented for this. Fucking no, stop it.
All right, I'm gonna look this up right now. Place your bets in the comments.
Fucking Jane anime. Yuko every lead.
Yuko every.
Yuko and Yuji every lead.
Okay.
The fucking pink bitch.
It's Mari Illustrious Makanami.
I have several questions, none of which will be answered ever, just from that name alone. But yeah, she's useless and she shows up to be hot. She's a sexy lamp. That's it.
Yeah.
They also just like, not only are the compositions in these movies not impressive, like the one compliment I'll give to 3 is that most of them are, and that movie is aesthetically miles ahead of these two. But the fucking they repeat compositions from the show, but change it ever so slightly, and it like always changes it for the worse. I think very notably, like the elevator scene is different for like no reason.
And that's another scene where like removing so much of the meat of the show makes that scene completely awful, because Asuka and Rei aren't characters in this. That moment means literally nothing. Like the closest thing we have to a character development scene is a scene in like an aquarium at the beginning of this movie where we see this like visual metaphor of like Rei looking into a fish tank, and it's like, okay,
Yeah, that was good. I liked that a lot. It was like,
that's the best thing we get.
that would be something that would be in the original show, and that I think would be, it's just like, it's very simple, very easy message to get across. It's simple storytelling. And the show, or not the show, the movie has so many opportunities to do things just like that, because they add a bunch of shit, especially with Mari. Like a lot of the characters, even like Rei, Asuka, and Shinji, spend more time together outside, divorced from Nerve in this. It's just that they're all behaving like their character archetypes while they do so they don't have any chemistry. And I'm like, you could be doing this and you could be building their relationships, you could be adding their chemistry, and you're just fucking not. You're just bashing 2 figures together. It's boring. It sucks. It tries your patience. It also feels so fucking long. I don't actually remember how long it is, but it feels like it's 3 fucking hours.
The first 2 movies are each like 2 hours long, and the third one's like 90 minutes.
Thank fucking God for that. Jesus Christ. But yeah, the second one, like, it's got all the same problems. It's definitely worse than the first one, just by merit of the fact that all of the new things are bad, and even the callbacks to the old things are now also bad. So instead of indifference, it's really just mild annoyance that it issues in you by the time you're done with it. It's like, I just don't know what the point of these movies are right now. Like, it's not fulfilling a function that I think is even worthwhile in any respect. It's just so annoying.
Yeah. I mean, it's just such an annoying, unflattering experience.
Speaking of annoying, unflattering experiences,
I don't want to talk about this one. Should we just get on to the real fucking thing here?
That's the thing, is there's really no more to say about 2s, because that's the problem with the first 2 movies, is that you can't say that much about them. They're just the show, but worse.
They have the same problems. They both suck. They're both dumb.
You've caught on to a trend here if you're listening to us at this point, and that our main core tenets and complaints of these 2 movies are as follows. A, they are aesthetically ugly and have very bad compositions and just don't use their medium very well. And B, they're just repeats of the show, but not as good, and it doesn't do anything original, and all the original things that it added in 2 don't add to anything. So, in 3, what happens is it is aesthetically dramatically better. The color design is actually good. The animation itself is improved. There's not a lot of moments where I was just like not feeling the animation, or feeling like it was too pasteled or too garish or whatever. It's like everything about it was pretty perfect, and a lot of the compositions in this super memorable, super stick in my mind, that aren't from the show.
Yeah.
And most importantly, this is completely new shit. It has
New content.
nothing to do. So you would think, in theory,
In theory.
the two of us specifically would get on board with this. And yet it's literally the worst one by so many miles. Like, where to even fucking begin with this? It's like the premise here of just being like it fixes the problems we have with the previous two, and then it's like, but not like that though.
Let's begin at the start of the movie where we have two opening scenes. This movie has two opening battle scenes. The first one is in space, and you're completely there's no tension. You're divorced from everything that's happening because it just kind of throws you in there. You've got no sense of the characters because
Yeah, just fighting an angel. It's,
notably there's been a 14-year time skip, but none of the characters have aged up because as Asuka so famously says, it's the curse of the Avas.
I like that is one of the many issues with this movie is that, like, I get that this is supposed to be a way more abstract turn of this story, and it is literally supposed to not adhere to very specific logic, and it's just trying to bow to the whims of whatever Ano thinks the themes are. But as a result of this insane undertaking that he's decided to go into, it has shit like the curse of the Avas and all of this world building shit that is just like,
the world
it's just
building is
not explained at all. Yeah, it's not explained at all when it really could serve to be. It's just like, oh, it's the curse of the Avas. I'm like, I literally don't know what that fucking means.
Here's the simple solution. The solution is the Ratatouille solution, where you just don't explain it because it doesn't matter.
If you were smart, that's why. Like, you would just be like, how has 14 years passed? And if nobody answered, I would have bought that much better than the curse of the Avas. Like,
it's exactly what we said in the Future Diary thing, where like no explanation is better than half-assing an explanation.
Don't half-ass anything, whole-ass one thing. I'm okay with it.
Whole ass or no ass.
That is the mentality that should be told. And I think the real thing about 3 that kills it mostly for me is that we talked about the sort of deconstruction first, story second thing, is that 3 literally has no story to it or no characters. It is just deconstructive, and it does so with all of these visual metaphors and character interactions that are just so disconnected from both each other and the film itself that it's just like, dude, you're just holding up a sign of what your movie's themes are and pointing them, and it's just, that's it. That is all you're doing.
Like,
and I'm like, why?
This movie has a first act and a third act and no second act.
Oh god, it's a structural fucking nightmare.
Because the first act of this movie is Shinji wakes up 14 years later, is dumb bullshit. Lee like runs away from Wheelay, was it? Vile?
Sure, yeah.
But it's like this splinter organization trying to stop Nerve, and we'll just address structure. I'm gonna first address the structure. We can get back to this stupid.
Yeah. You were baffled by this when we got to the end of the third act, and I was just like, it's been 25 minutes, and you were like, no fucking way that it was. I can't believe that lasted that long, and it did.
But yeah, this whole first act, he's like joined up with Nerve. They're like doing stuff. They're fighting. They're like fighting, and then he's joined up with Wheelay. The Nerve captures him, and he meets Kaoru. They have their little fucking gay bait. That's the thing. It doesn't even feel like it's committing to the romance between the two. It just feels like queer bait fully.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like yaoi baiting. That's it.
Yeah. But that's the first act. And then the third act, remember, there's no second act in this movie because It's got no structure. Third act, they're like going down into this shaft to get the this thing.
In a Pacific Rim Ava where both Shinji and Kaoru were piloting it at the same time.
Yeah, but they're going down this shaft. They got to get the Lance of Longinus and the Lance of Cassius.
Because I too have read the Bible and know that Longinus was the soldier that stabbed Jesus. And it's like, I know this show has been pretty overbearing with some of its like religious metaphors and imagery and stuff, but it's just like, you're really just laying it on too thick at this point. It's just
And
like,
also,
really?
like,
Come on.
Cassius bringing in like the Divine Comedy for whatever reason.
It's supposed to be that Kaoru is the fucking
he is the guy who betrayed. He's supposed to be like the Brutus, I think, is what they're going for.
Well, see, they do that. They that he's supposed to be like that, and he's supposed to be like Shinji is Dante, and Kaoru is the other character in the Divine Comedy, the narrator who takes him through the other layers.
I
of
know
hell.
who you're talking about. So
yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. And then they go down and they find this like angel thing that was impaled with the spears, and then fucking Asuka shows up, and the fucking
and
body pillow shows up, and they both try to stop Shinji from doing the thing.
And he does the thing.
And he does the thing, even though his entire character conflict has resulted from the fact that people were upset with him for doing the thing in the last movie that destroyed everything.
And he's like, and Kaoru's telling him, hey, don't do this thing. This is bad. Don't do
Kaoru
this.
is the only person who's been nice to him this whole time. So it makes zero sense that he wouldn't listen to him in this moment at all. And I'm just like, what is this meant to convey? The writing is so confused. I don't even know what the function even is anymore, and that's all the movie's even doing. So,
but that's the structure. Now we can go into like story beats and breakdown.
So the first 25 minutes of this are 2 action scenes that last forever.
One of them is the 5-minute opening scene, as we've alluded to.
The 5-minute long opening scene of them fighting in space. And then there's a 20-minute long scene of everybody fighting an angel. And like, yes, the animation's better. The action is better. The sound design is better. And it's 20 minutes long. Nothing important happens in these 20 minutes. It's not showing you that like, it is Nerve behaving as Nerve has always done. They kill an angel.
Or I guess like, the Splinter organization, whatever
they
they're
could
called.
be like, they could accomplish all of this shit in 1 minute, and it takes them 20. And I'm like, again, you're not like, why is the fact that you had to condense everything into a 20-minute long episode not showing here by doing this superfluous bullshit? And then maybe the thing that, like, it's not the worst thing about it, but it's the thing I dislike the most is the fact that all of the characters have like redesigns, and they're all grim, dark, and edgy. Like Misato is like, her hair's all short.
Yeah.
And just
Asuka's got an eye patch to reference
Asuka
the one
literally
part.
has a fucking eye patch.
To reference the one part in EOE where she gets her eye stabbed out, and
it's like, a fucking parody. It's a fucking fanfic.
We were both just shouting new metal lyrics over the scenes with them because it was so cartoonishly silly.
So what if you could see the darker side of me? Fucking the animal I have become. It's like a fucking movie that's just designed to be edited into a fucking AMV set to like a 3 Days Grace or
and I've seen song. AMVs of that, and they're cool. But it's like, yep, that's the only purpose this serves.
And the whole time is that this is the most telling thing about it, is that it's like, oh, everyone's like, everything is your fault, Shinji. You did this. Like, you were the person who caused all of this. And then Shinji's just like, I was? Okay, I guess I'm useless now. And it's like, the way they treat him is like, it's gone sentient. It's like this whole deconstruction thing where Shinji's this useless character is like, that's supposed to be his opinion of himself. Everyone else is supposed to view him in their own specific light. And now it's just like, oh, well, he's just bad because that's what the deconstructionist part of the show is. It's talking about and addressing the fact that he's useless. So everyone has to hate him now. And it's like, why? Evangelion without the connections between its characters isn't Evangelion. You just have Shinji walking around, observing people. All of them hate him. Rei just like doesn't do anything. She just sits in a shed on the edge of this place,
Oh
this
my gosh,
thing, and I
it's
don't know what it is. She just sits in the shed and she's just like, is that like is that a kind of thing that Rei Ayanami would do? Get it? Because she has an identity crisis and doesn't know who she
this
is.
is also part of like what makes us stupid, that like every you never get a sense of any of the locations in this film. Like
Worse than the first two, and
worse
as a
than the
matter of
first
fact.
two, it just like I like in the original show, I feel from memory I could draw like a fairly accurate map of like Nerve's headquarters and like
Yeah.
vaguely what it looks like, even if it's not like super defined. You get the sense that things connect to each other, that it's all like the same building. These locations could be 5 miles apart and I would not know the
Yeah.
difference.
No sense of geography whatsoever. And
Yeah.
well, I think another thing too is just that it's like all of the characters are just like cartoonish parodies of their main flaw, to the point where it's just like it loses all of the nuance. And it's just like Evangelion is a show that is literally just like about how people, the interiority of people is so much more complex than how they appear to you in like a one-dimensional way, that you can't fathom how complicated they all are. And then this movie, it subverts our expectations by making all of these characters the most boring versions of themselves. What in God's holy name are you blathering about? Like, why? What is the purpose of this? What, like, it doesn't tell me anything that I didn't already know. It's doing this completely different thing and doing this abstract thing where it's like, oh, Kaoru and Shinji are gonna play the piano together because it's a metaphor for the fact that they had butt sex or whatever. And it's just like, I knew it already. I knew they had this connection.
I
Why
got
is showing it to me in a worse way enough?
and there's also this really weird, like Kaoru and Shinji's relationship for the most part is shown through like a montage rather
Yeah.
than them actually having scenes together. Like we just get this montage of like notes being placed, like sheet music essentially being written out, and it's the least compelling thing ever.
Yeah.
Like show me that. Don't tell me there's a connection between these people. Show me it with like clarity, so I like get why these people like each other, because I don't get a sense of why Kaoru and Shinji like each other beyond like
No, he just shows up and he's just like, I'm your boyfriend now. And it's like, okay,
okay,
sure.
sure, why not.
And that's the emotional focal point of the film too. It's just like they just start talking and they play the piano, and then suddenly they're in the fucking mech together and they go to pull the spear of Longinus. And the part of the movie that's supposed to tug at your heartstrings is when Kaoru, for some
Oh my
fucking
gosh, this
reason,
scene was so dumb.
just takes off Shinji's fucking Suicide Squad collar that's gonna blow his head up if he activates an Eva, and then gives it to himself instead of just like
Just
throwing it
throwing it
away.
away.
And then at the end, what happens? But Shinji, ignoring what everyone is telling him to do, pulls the Spear of Longinus, activates an Eva, and naturally Kaoru's head fucking explodes right in front of him. And it's like, this is supposed to be the thing that makes me sad. Like, I don't feel anything for these two in this relation. Like, this isn't the Shinji I know. This isn't the Kaoru I know. They're just these facsimiles. They're these
No,
two-dimensional
it's
fucking nothing people.
and it's something I even struggle to try and like give a better alternative to, like what should have been done, because anything, I just don't see how things got to this utilitarian dystopia of a film where it's been stripped of all emotion and is strictly function.
Yeah, it's fucking no plot, only lore. It's just such a silly facsimile. I think I described it in my Letterboxd review as Hideaki Anno playing an elaborate game of filmic charades to convey to you the themes of a thing you've already seen before. And it's like, yeah, that's it. This movie is a slideshow. It is basically a video essay on itself. It is just like, it's like the parts of the house that Jack built, the Lars von Trier movie,
Yeah.
where Matt Dillon is literally explaining his character and the themes of the movie in a slideshow to Bruno Ganz. And it's just like, oh,
Oh
good.
yeah.
The worst part of that movie is just the entirety of this. Great. I love it.
Yeah, that part is that part of the house that Jack built is such a good comparison because that's
It's
exactly what
still
this
better
is.
than this.
It's still better because at least there's like some because at least in the lamppost scene of the house that Jack built,
I'm
that's
glad
like
that you leapt directly to what I was thinking about in the fucking lamppost.
that scene is like kind of stupidly hilarious in a sense where it's like, oh my god, this is the dumbest thing ever. It's kind of funny. But this is just barren.
Yeah, it's just such a skeletal, hollow thing, and it's just like, again, it's that edgy like, oh, I'm gonna make everything like really dark and subvert things and just be like, okay, this
Kaoru's not gonna
whole
have his head bitten off. It's gonna be blown up, and there's
it,
gonna be blood everywhere.
I think my least favorite like meme of storytelling to ever emerge is the whole like, oh, this subverting your expectations, which came around mainly because of the popularization of one Mr. Ryan Johnson in The Last Jedi. And it's just like the way people talk about that movie and Evangelion is it tires me. It pisses me off. Not just because I'm sick of hearing about both of them, which to a degree I am, but it's like I don't love The Last Jedi because it's a deconstruction. I love The Last Jedi because it's a good movie with a good set of characters and a good story that happens to have deconstructive elements in it that I think are smart. You have to have a good backbone to be able to do this kind of shit. Like,
No,
if it was
exactly.
just a deconstruction, if it was just a subversion of expectations, it'd be worthless. I don't care. I don't care that it's a subversion. It just happens to be that. You can't only be that. And if you want to only be that, you have to commit to it. Then you get something like the movie Holy Motors, or something that's like very purely an expression in an artistic way that's
Where
like
you yeah,
committed.
and those and Holy Motors is a great example because that's something where like, or I guess you could even say like to an extent an Alexandro Jodorowsky film where you're going so overboard that it becomes just completely its own thing, and you're not even able to tie it back to something else. It's just its own unique artistic expression of this one person that is solely setting out to overwhelm you. And that's fascinating. That can be fascinating in and of its own right, but it just doesn't go all the way with that. It's like trying to do Ava.
Ouroboros, it's every good thing it could potentially do. It just eats its own tail continuously, and just for every good or potentially good thing that could arise from this approach, it does it in a way that just nullifies itself, and it becomes basically like we can't readily convey this, but it's just like watching this was basically agony. Like the both of us were just constantly like we were bored for the first act, and then the remaining two acts we were just unfathomably annoyed. Every single like line of dialogue and all of this is just like, oh great, I love a movie that's been made off of the cliff notes of this franchise. It's just there's no reason for this to exist. And like I'm really not trying to come at the people who love this movie because a lot of people I know and like mutuals that I have love it. And like look, you do you and everything, but I
I,
don't get the purpose
I
of this
don't
at
get it.
all.
I don't get it
Like,
at all.
I simply do not understand what this movie like does or is, and to the point where it like makes me question why people like Ava to begin with. I'm like, do you all like that because you think that it's like better than other mech shows, and that's like the only thing that it has going for it? Because it's like, first of all, you're selling those other mech shows short because they're just as
Yeah.
dark as Ava is in many respects. You just haven't seen
No, and
them.
it's exactly what I was getting at earlier with this point of how Ava's not really a deconstruction. It's
Mm-hmm.
just construed that way.
It's just a very dark take on its subject matter, which I mean, it's like mech anime has always been about the horrors of war, child soldiers, fucking having to deal with trauma while having to be thrust into the world of adulthood. Like, all of these things are things that were in this genre. It's like Evangelion isn't a landmark piece of fiction because it invented these things. It's a landmark piece of fiction because it arguably perfected them. It's not as if it's like significantly better. It's just taking things that already existed and amalgamating them into something that is very singular and cool. And that's why I would argue that other things that are like Gainax adjacent, or things like Kill la Kill or Gurren Lagann, that's what makes them great too,
Oh
is
yeah,
that they're pulling from so many different things, and they're not better than those things, but they're trying to innovate themselves. And as a result, stand apart from it like a little bit. It's just an excellent version of these things.
No. And yeah, that's really just the core of the problems here, that it seems not to understand itself.
And I feel like there's a bunch of people who would be willing and ready to just be like, oh, well, all of this is the point. And it's just like, first of all, I know, thank you for telling me that. I know it's the point. I hate the point. I think the point sucks. I think the point is stupid and I hate it.
Yeah.
The only thing I want to touch on now really is speculation for this final movie, because technically it has come out in Japan.
But we haven't seen it.
We haven't seen it. There's no way to access it right now, but we will talk about it once we finally get around to it. But it's like this weird thing where the first two movies are, again, minor differences aside, basically the show. And then this third movie, which is this totally new thing. I don't know how they're gonna follow this up. Like, part of me thinks that this is just going to be like the beginning of 3.0 plus 1.0 is going to be like Shinji waking up and like 3 was a nightmare, basically.
I
like,
can only hope.
Like, like, I know it sounds stupid in like theory, but like I just feel as if that, like, even if this was a good version of that being done, that's the only way you could continue that story and make it make sense, because like I just don't see what they could do in like this timeline anymore, because it's just like everything is fucked now. Like, what else can be even done now?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my other speculation is that it could be the long-running fan theory of this being a sequel to the original show.
Yeah, I haven't really read too deeply into those. Do you know anything more about
I
that?
haven't really, mainly because I don't care, and if they are, I'm gonna be morbidly depressed.
Yeah, that's something that, again, that's just like, it being a sequel to the original show would just be like, it's the deconstruction thing. It's just like, okay, but like, why? Like, what's the actual point of that, though, other than to be like, oh, well, it's actually a sequel? It's like, okay, but like, why is it a sequal? Like, is there a reason? Is there a purpose?
Was the original ending of Evangelion not good enough?
Yeah, I mean, God bless Ano. Like, I really feel for him in so many respects. It's like he clearly has more than Eva going on, which I'm very glad that seems to be the case, because it's like he has Shin Godzilla. A lot of people love that movie. He has that new Ultraman movie coming out, which looks pretty cool, and I'm sure we'll talk about that when it airs. And like he's got his fingers in multiple pots, and I'm glad that he doesn't just have this, because as a creative that would make me so singularly sad that it's like just devoting yourself to this, because it's like, on the one hand, I'm glad that he has the artistic clarity and freedom to make this in the way that he wants, but also Ava is this lightning in a bottle thing that trying to recapture, you can really only fall short of, even if you just did all the same things over again.
Yeah, I mean, as evidenced by what we have.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, but it's just like, I get being a perfectionist that wants to like go back and change this thing to be more like you wanted it to be. And considering how tumultuous the production of Ava and End of Ava were, that desire, like, I get it. I understand that. I think you should be able to do that in some respect. It's just, again, not like that though. Like,
Yeah.
I just, like, this whole grimdark thing is just not something, I don't like this in any, it reminds me, this is a reference literally only I will understand, but there was a television show that aired when I first got into like shows and anime and like stories called Heroes. And the infamous thing about Heroes is that it has a great first season, and then the following 4 seasons are just like fucking terrible. And I watched like all of them when I was a kid because, you know, I didn't know any better. And there's this part in the second season where time travel is introduced, and like you see the entire cast of the show like 2 years onward, and all of it is just like they all like walked out of a Hot Topic. Like all of them just look grimdark and edgy, and they're all like sour and like, ugh, life is pain. And it's just like they literally just did that with Ava. And I hate it. Like in concept, I hate it. In execution, I hate it so much more because they don't attempt to explore. It's like, I don't know what's changed with Misato or Ritsuko since that. It's just like,
No,
yeah, they
yeah.
became bitchy. What
Yeah,
about their
no,
lives?
like
What has changed? I don't
we
know.
yeah, you just don't get a sense of what any of this means. It makes the 14-year time skip feel erroneous. Like it could have been a 1 week time skip and it would have had the same effect.
It just exhausts me, and it makes me very, very sad because it's like, you know, and my opinion could very well just like not turn, but like heighten, I suppose. It's like I definitely don't love Ava and End of Ava as much as most people do. Granted, if I watched it right now, that I could totally see myself loving it in that exact way. But it's just like Ava's still something that's really special to me and special to a lot of people. And
Yeah,
you know, more power to you if you enjoy these. But I can't fathom
yeah.
being a fan of. I mean, to be honest, not to bring back Star Wars into this, but it's like the people who say they love both The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, where I'm just kind of like, I feel like on some level you're just kind of deluding yourself because one is so inherently antithetical to the other that it's like if you love this thing, you should hate this thing because of what it says about the other thing. Like I don't know how you can love them at the same time. It just doesn't check for me. Even the first 2 movies, like they're at least still recognizably Ava on some level, even if it's only skin deep. Whereas 3 is just it's a refutation in many ways.
It's just so, yeah, odd. And I think on that note we've kind of talked through this.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yeah, kind of going in circles, and we will only go further if we continue because, man, oh man, this movie pisses us off.
Yeah, I mean, like, I want to say that it can only go up from here, but I will
I,
not say that anymore
I,
because it
I,
literally could be worse.
if 3.0 plus 1.0 is worse than this, I don't know what I'll do.
I mean, I'll be inconsolable, frankly. I'm genuinely hoping for just like as bad. Like, I'll take it. Like, I'll be pissed, but I'll take it. But if
I
it's somehow worse, like I've got the first movie I've got it a 5 out of 10. Second I've got a 4 out of 10, and 3 I have it a 2 out of 10, just because I think it's markedly worse.
yeah,
And
I agree with all of those.
probably
I'd be happy with a 3. I would be happy with a 3.
it's on the same level as The Last Mission for me because I hate it in very similar ways. Like I don't know which of the 2 I would hate more because they do the exact same thing of just like shitting on the good thing that I like.
I think I hate the last mission a little more just because
There's less effort and artistic integrity
there's
to it.
less effort. Yeah, so I don't know. I think that's kind of what we got to say about this.
Yeah, leave in the comments below how much we're dumb. Sorry. But
Yeah.
up on the pipeline, we'll be talking about things like the Fate Stay Night Heaven's Field trilogy. We're going to be covering Fate things soon. We're watching Death Note as it is, you know, so stay tuned. We've got more stuff for you, but
Be watching things we like.
yeah, thank God, at least partially.
At least partially. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.